Welcome to God in the Marketplace, everyone. This is Andy Esposito. I'm your host. Today, our guests are Angus Martin and Josh Plock, and they are entrepreneurs. They own several businesses separately, but they co-own Birch Co. Homes together. So we have a lot to get into. Let's dive in. First question I want to ask you guys is really about your partnership. I think there's a lot of people that want to partner up together, but are always nervous about, is it going to work? But you guys found a way to make it work. I know this is something that's kind of new for you guys. Let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about how it happened, how it unfolded, and where you guys are at now.
Yep. Well, I mean, we honestly always describe business partnerships kind of like a marriage. So we got to know each other. We kind of dated, if you will, for a while, and met each other started this year, started talking about kind of some of our mentalities of how we run teams, run our businesses, what our values are, as individuals, and what values we wanted in our companies. And really, it just kind of took off when we started working together, went to a conference together, and Josh had already been talking with Birch Co. a little bit. And that's when we decided to partner up and fired that. And here we are about 10 months later, and still are good. We're officially married now. So
that's awesome. So you have your businesses that you run separately, but together you come together. Why Birch Co? Why the new construction, the new home business?
Yeah, Angus and I, like you mentioned, both had different experiences in the past being entrepreneurs. So we were able to take from that, a lot of the things that we were looking for and was important to us. And, when we were looking for this acquisition, and, what we had in Birch was just an incredible culture. They had an incredible leadership team. They had a great set of values that were intrinsically kind of built into what they did. And for us, we just felt it was a really comfortable fit. I think we've both maybe done different things in the past where you're trying to turn that ship a little bit, and adjust it. And we didn't have that while we were looking at Birch.
Yeah.
It was just a great fit.
Yeah. So when you guys met and you discussed some of your, ideals and the way you guys structure business and stuff, did you guys both just have a peace about it? Did you have to pray about it? Was it like, was there just so much grace that you guys came together very easily? What did that feel like? I'm more on like the spiritual side of things of having peace, or was it more just looking at the facts and the numbers?
Yeah, I think especially in business culture nowadays, like the big thing that a lot of people talk about, especially with like real estate, is, how much cash flow can you get? How much can you hustle? Can you overwork? Can you, kind of screw over people? And, whenever you talk to a lot of real estate guys or just people in business in general, that's the mentality they have. Yeah, that's something that Josh didn't have. That's something that I didn't have. And I don't want to say that's kind of rare to find, but honestly, that's a little rare to find as somebody that says, hey, really all that I care about is providing good, healthy jobs for people, investing in teams, investing in culture. And hopefully out of that, we can also make money and provide for our families. And Josh and I both had those same ideals and those same principles. And so I know we both prayed about it, sought God about it. And there was this kind of a natural piece of like, hey, this just makes sense.
Yeah.
We need to do this. There wasn't really any hesitation of, hey, I think he's only in this for the money, or
sure,
he's only in this to better
that's great
himself.
That's great. Josh, now you have a ministry background, right? Like you went to Bible school. You had it was in your heart to go plant a church and pastor a church, but then something else happened. So talk about the transition from, your heart and passion for ministry to now doing business in the marketplace.
Yeah, I attended Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, so Jerry Falwell's school. And I didn't start out in ministry, even though I went to Bible college. I was in industry for 15 or so years. We really felt a calling that God wanted us to move out to Oklahoma. So I left at a director position. We left and just moved to Oklahoma. Kind of think my wife may have been here once. I had never been here before we moved. We just felt it was what God wanted us to do. And like I said, I left the director role in Baltimore, and my first job I could find here was Chick-fil-A. So I went from that to working $12 an hour at Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
And so we had planted the church. I was executive pastor first, and then took over as the lead pastor for a while. Just that was an incredible time. We had incredible relationships that we built. Really secured our foundation here in Oklahoma. But unfortunately, we were never able to grow that church to where, it was really hitting forward momentum. So we eventually merged with some other churches, and I had stepped back.
Yeah. Okay. So it was more like, it almost felt like you were not pricking against the goad, but like there wasn't grace for that. And you found more grace and joy in marketplace. Is that kind of a safe way to assume it?
I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, it was, our church was still in that entrepreneurial startup stage for a long time.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's Brother Hagin had a book a while. I think he wrote it back in the 80s. It's called Plans, Purposes, and Pursuits. And in there he talks about there's people who are pastoring, they're called to pastor, but they're doing business. There's people that are in business that they're called to pastor. And you have grace for certain things. And, but I think because planning a church is so entrepreneurial, I think that there's a lot of that. And my heart is to see people not fall away. There's a lot of people that I see that, they feel like they're called to ministry and ministry doesn't work. And so when it doesn't work, they throw the baby out the bathwater. They quit pursuing God. They quit praying. And that just kind of goes. So that's awesome to hear. What would you guys tell someone who is maybe not in their place? They're not in their calling, but they're trying to find it. They're trying to pursue, they're trying to figure out what it is that their calling and their purpose is.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I'm the young one in the group. And so I still have friends that come to me and say, man, I have no idea what to do with my life. They're turning 30 and they're like, I haven't hit these goals. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. And a lot of them, I feel like just don't take risk, and they don't really trust that God has them in every moment.
Yeah.
I know even in my own life, my wife's life, we did a lot of things that seemed totally counterculture or totally against what a normal person would do, but we knew God had grace for that.
Sure.
I know a lot of my friends or a lot of people that I talk to, they've got big goals, big aspirations, big visions, but they'll stay in the job that's easy, or they'll stay in this position that's, the easiest with the least resistance. But I really think, as believers, as, entrepreneurs, we get big rewards out of trusting God and taking those risks.
Yeah.
And so you can't get where you want to go without having some level of risk taking in that.
Yeah.
So
I'll add really similar to that. And we're sitting in your recording studio and I see you have action is always the next step. And Willie George at Church on the Move always said this, and it always spoke to me. He said, we hear this term leap of faith. And he said, God doesn't call us to leap into the abyss. He leads us in steps.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we just need to take that next step.
Yeah.
Where to Angus's point, right, we'll be held up because we're looking for the finish line and we want to be really clear, on what it's going to look like on the other side. We don't get that a lot of times.
Yeah.
But, we need to take that step.
That's true. And I think for people who are perfectionists too, I struggle with that in the beginning too. It's like everything has to be perfect. I have to know everything, before I can take this step. And it's more like a journey. Wouldn't you say you're almost discovering, you're walking with God in this journey and you're really discovering what your calling and your purpose is. I don't think there's a few people that wake up one day and God tells them this is what you're called to, and they know and they pursue that thing their whole life. I wouldn't say that's the majority. I think the majority of people are walking this out, figuring it out, and it's something that, God leads them into through trials, through tribulations, through stressful situations. I was in ministry. It didn't work out. I was getting frustrated. I felt like I needed to be where people weren't, around people who weren't saved, who didn't feel like they knew it all. And I just thrived better. I feel like I have more grace and I thrive better in the marketplace, rather than in a church all day. So that's pretty awesome. How would you say that God is using your faith to impact the marketplace? Like whether it's, you know, through your businesses, through your giving, like what are some examples that maybe you can give us and share with us on how you feel like God's using your faith, this opportunity for being an entrepreneur to impact the marketplace?
I know one thing that, you know, I always talk about and always communicate to entrepreneurs is that, you know, if we can provide really healthy workplaces for people, they can really improve their lives outside of the business. So if you think about it, if your work-life balance is good, if you're paid well, if you're really thriving in your work, well, guess what? Now you have more time to spend with your family. You have more time to actually go to church to pray,
Sure.
and you have those opportunities. And so I know a big thing for Josh and I is giving people the opportunity to have a healthy workplace. So then outside of work, they can really thrive in their personal lives. Yeah. And so, I mean, if we can do that, I mean, people's lives are radically changed compared to, man, I've got to have 3 jobs just to make this work, or I've got to, you know, stress out and work 80 hours a week. It's like, that's not what we want for our staff, because we know if they're healthy outside of work, man, they're going to thrive while they're here with our business.
That's awesome. And it almost makes you want to like, what could we do to have more people, more lives to influence? Because not everyone gets that, you know, and like, you know, I have a friend who won't mention his name nor the company, but he worked for one builder and didn't realize how good he had it there because they were so family oriented. And you know, if his kid had a sports event to go to, he can go to it, and went to a more corporate nationwide company and was never, I mean, he had his days off, X amount of days off he can have the year. And outside of that, he had to miss a lot of his kids' sports things. And yeah, that is just the nature of that kind of culture, is to grind and to hustle and all that kind of stuff. Any opportunities to, like, you know, pray with people, or, you know, maybe someone who isn't saved, you get to share the gospel like through what you guys do? Is there, do you think of any examples like that? Any opportunities?
Yeah, I would add, you know, to both of those points, we also have some really concrete things that we're able to do. Like we have a Birch Gives Back program, you know, where we're just literally donating money based on houses that we build.
Awesome.
To charities that are in town. So we have, you know, even really concrete opportunities like that. You know, I think that we sometimes take for granted or don't realize how everyone around us is watching us at all times. You know, so I have a good friend who's an atheist, and we've had God conversations just because seeing how I respond to stressful situations over the years. You know, I've known him for a long time, and fortunately I've been in a number of stressful situations, you know, that he's been involved in, but we've had that conversation where that, you know, I've seen you react differently, you know, because of your faith.
Yeah. That's huge. I have a book called My Part. It's about personal evangelism, and I talk about, there it is. I throw it over here. My Part, it's a small book, bathroom read, kind of like you were mentioning earlier. But it is, in there I talk about that. Like, they will watch you to see if you're real before they find out it's real. And that our actions should speak louder, you know, than our word. Like, there's a lady at work who may have, you know, crosses everywhere and have display her Christianity outwardly. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes they're putting out outwardly what they're lacking inwardly, right? And so sometimes it's just your character, your integrity, the way you treat people, the fruits people see in the fruits of the Spirit in your life that really draws people. And so that's huge. And the fact that you guys are in positions of influence, you can influence lives like that. Would you say that from a business standpoint, like, you know, co-laboring with God, what does that look like when it comes to decision-making, ideas, growing a business? What does that look like? Obviously, God, you know, wants us to invite into everything. He wants to walk with us through everything. It's not like, oh, you know, you're not praying for people today. You're not behind a pulpit that I don't want to co-labor. No, like, he wants to co-labor in every area of our lives. What does that look like for you guys being business owners? And,
you know, for me, this is something I've struggled with for a long time, because I think as a Bay entrepreneurs, our initial reaction is just to dig in and fix it ourselves.
Sure.
Right. we can do this, it's on us, we've got this. That's always the, your initial reaction. And it's really something I've been working on. I really feel like God's given me over the last probably 18 to 24 months, people that I've been looking at either in my life or, even podcasts of where people are more outspoken about their faith. So that's, you're never there. So it's always a continuing journey. And it's just to your point, just continuing to pray, continuing to seek, taking more time maybe on decisions to pray through them, make sure you're not answering with emotion. There's a lot of emotion around us in a lot of our decisions. So, the risk is to always answer with that emotion. And so for me, it's just, making sure that I'm giving myself that space to be able to pray about it, seek God, make sure we're being able to answer correctly.
Yeah, I know for me, this is something that Jim and I talk about a lot is, what's a worldly business versus a kingdom business? Worldly business is just about profit margin, getting over on people, but how would Jesus run his business? It's like Jesus would run it discipling people, like encouraging people around him, he would give back to the community. And so co-laboring with God, it's like, I think God has called us into this business for a purpose. And the purpose is to, make sure that he's known and make sure that people know that, we possess the love of God and we possess, the mentality that Jesus would have in running his business, because it would still be successful. It would still make money. It would still have all these things, but man, it would bless people every single time that we do it. And so we're always thinking like, hey, is this a kingdom way of doing this, or is this a worldly way?
Yeah.
And we always have to toy with that dichotomy back and forth.
Yeah, that reminds me, I was listening to this guy speak. I won't mention his name, but he basically, someone asked him, because he grew, like he always did well, but then he got into a place of exceptional wealth, right? And he has to remind himself, he was saying that, at the end of the day, God trusts you, and you don't want to lose that trust, because, he had a point where in the beginning, he had to believe God for everything. But then when actual wealth came into his life, it was like he noticed that he would stop, because he had the resources and the money, he would stop checking in with God to do things and so he got to a point, and then it grew even more, but he said he got to a point to where even though he had the money and the resources to go do something, he would say, hey, God, I want to acquire this, and he said one time the Lord told him, yes, you can get it, but don't use your money. And so he really had to rely on God, and it ended up coming through different avenues. But I just think about that, like, when you go, like sometimes how fast money can become your source again. Like when you have it, it's like, oh, you can just rely on that and just go do things and pursue things because you have the money to do that. But when you stay grounded like that and kind of wrestle with those type of, ideals.
Yeah, I know something that a good mentor of mine, he he told me about a year or two ago. We were talking back and forth, and he said, man, what's the closest point you've ever, had with God? Like when have you been the closest to him? And of course, I give this big, elegant story of, whenever I was in college and this happened, we were at this revival, and, I got really, stirred up and all this stuff. And he, listened to my story for 5 minutes, as I expounded upon all this, and like, wow, that's amazing, Angus. And he's like, really, it's kind of a trick question. He said, what you should be answering is right now.
Yeah.
Right now is when you should be the closest to God.
Yeah.
And man, that struck me. I was like, you're right. Like, I shouldn't be thinking about this moment that happened 5 years ago. I need to be thinking about this moment right now. This is why I need to stay on the closest. And so I think about that, every single week. It's like, hey, it's my answer to that question still this moment 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 months ago, because the answer should always be right here, right now. This is when I feel the closest to God.
So which brings up my next question, which would be, you have several businesses, you have families, right? This world is chaotic and busy. Our phones are distractions. How do you stay God conscious amidst of a chaotic, busy world? Like, kids' sports, work, employees, deadlines. There's all kinds of stuff. How do you stay God conscious in the midst of that?
I'll answer, but I don't know that I have a good answer.
Okay. Hey, we're all learning and
right?
growing,
It's just continuing to refocus for me, right? And sometimes that means changing my schedule when I get into different season. Waking up earlier, something like that. But it's something that just have to continue for me.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out a magic plan. Just have to keep working on it and reworking on it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the really weird thing that I do, Andy. And this is my one weird quirk about me is my one. Yeah, maybe not. Josh knows me. Yeah, see, we've been married for a while now.
Yeah.
But every 2 weeks, what I do is I actually do sensory deprivation therapy, and so I'll go and do float tank therapy. And so I know that me, naturally, I'm just never going to shut off my phone, never going to not answer that call at 9 o'clock, which my wife loves, So what I'll do is I'll go over to a place here in town called H2 Oasis. I pay them money, and then they take my phone, take everything, and I go and I sit in this Epsom salt bath.
Dark, yep.
Dark, no noise, no nothing. And, over the years, I've gotten up to about 2 hours, and trust me, the first 30 minutes of that, I'm just overwhelmed by have to do this, have to do that, have to do this. I need to call this person. But man, after about 30, 45 minutes, all of a sudden things get calmer. And then I just feel super close to God. And I can actually think, I can actually work through things. And
you might want to look into buying one of those, keeping it in the
seriously,
in the office.
Yeah. And I have membership. They write on the wall. It's this is float number 187 or
Wow.
Whatever. Go mad.
That's awesome. Yeah. Our pastor, we go to the same church. So Pastor Matt's really big on setting up rhythms in your life. And I know for me, if I don't get that time in the morning, the rest of the day is just a challenge. It's I'm racing more. I'm running from one thing to the next. If I don't get that time in the morning, but it's and for me, I like the privacy part. It's hard. My kids and wife are around. It's hard for me. Yes, I can go in my office and do it, but I like to be alone. And it's not always hard to get that. But in my car, just staying God conscious. I think that's how we walk with God. It's to just stay God conscious. And there's different things you can do. One of our last guests said that she would set up a thing on her phone 3 times a day to go off, and it would remind her to just take a second to detach from what she's doing. But awesome. So last question I'm going to ask you guys. I just like to, I like to read. I like books. Our readers, our listeners also are always looking for what book would you say helps you, whether it's the spiritual side, like the ruthless elimination of hurry, which helps you to slow down, connect with God, or on the business side, what book would you say has helped you, or maybe even both, in your business to get to where you're at, that's made an impact in your life?
See Josh looking up his book, so I'll go.
Yeah, shoot.
So actually, I have a great answer for this one because I didn't realize how much of an impact it made on my staff. But Monday night this week, some of my old employees from Crossroads Counseling, whenever I had that company, they came over to our house for dinner, s'mores, fire pit, all that stuff. And, I sold that company over a year ago now. A lot of them are at different companies, or some of them are still at the new company. And we were sitting there talking, and one of them said, man, I actually printed out some of the material from that book you shared and gave it to my new manager because they weren't the example. And somebody else said, yeah, actually they're a level 1 leader. And they started talking about all these concepts in this book, and they was 5 people that we had walked through a book called Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell. And I heard all of them just talking about, man, I still use that principle. I'm printing it off. I'm sharing it with my managers. Now I'm in management, and actually I walked my team through this example. And, to me, I just thought it was a book that we walked through and thought was good and thought they needed to learn some of those principles. But hearing so many years later, because we did that book 3 years ago
Yeah.
with the staff, and still to this day, they're quoting it, they're printing it off,
That's awesome.
they're sharing it. So I know for me, that's one thing that, even for Birchco, at some point, got to walk them through developing the legal feet within you.
Yeah.
So
Such a good book.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I think I have two. I couldn't pull it up. Is it Unreasonable Hospitality? We're going to double check. I just read it. Unreasonable Hospitality talks about how everybody wants to belong to something and how you can help your both employees and customers, give them wow moments and continue to make them feel special. Yep, Unreasonable Hospitality. And then the other one is 10X is better than 2X. And it just talks about,
Who's the author of that one?
I'll have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fairly new. Benjamin Hardy. That's who
Okay.
it is. Yep. And it just talks about, if you're going to 2X something, then you usually can think about how you're going to do that. And it's kind of within your scope. But if you were going to 10X it, you have to think differently.
Yeah. That's
Those are my
great.
two.
I don't know if you guys know Kevin Bjorklund or not, but he was on our show too. And he was saying, if you can achieve your goal, then you're not thinking big enough, because it's going to cause you to think differently. So that's an awesome principle. Well, guys, that's all we have today. Thank you for coming. Glad to have you guys on. If you're listening today and you're thinking about building a home, definitely look up Birchco Homes. They are in Tulsa and the surrounding areas. They're a great builder, a great company. But thanks for listening, and we'll be back in touch soon.